The year was 1878, and the dusty town of Silverton, Wyoming, gleamed under lantern light like gold that had long since lost its shine. Inside Turner's saloon, the piano played a broken tune, and the laughter came loud from men who'd had too much whiskey and too little kindness. At the back of the room stood Ellie Turner, daughter of the saloon owner, though no one called her Miss Turner. Around town, she was just the girl who cleaned the tables, fetched the whiskey, and smiled when she ought to frown. Her dress that night was torn not out of style, but out of poverty. The faded blue cotton had a rip at the hem and a stain that wouldn't wash out, no matter how hard she scrubbed. A group of cattle hands near the bar noticed. One of them leaned back in his chair, grinning meanly. "Hey, Ellie. That dress comes from the charity bin or the barn." The room erupted in cruel laughter. Ellie froze, her cheeks flushing red. She kept her eyes down, clutching a tray of empty glasses. "Evenin', gentlemen," she said softly, trying to slip past. But another man blocked her path. "Ain't no shame in dressin' poor," he said with a smirk. "Just means you dance cheaper." The laughter grew louder, uglier. The piano player slowed, uneasy. Ellie swallowed hard. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into the sawdust floor. But she couldn't, not while her father's debt chained her to this place. Then, from the corner near the door, came a voice. "Enough." The laughter stopped. A tall man stood up from his seat, the light from the lanterns catching on the silver buckle at his waist. His hat was old, his coat dusty from the trail, but his eyes, gray and calm, carried the kind of quiet strength that made even drunk men sober up. "Who the hell are you?" one of the ranch hands asked. "Name's Caleb Holt," the stranger said, stepping forward. "And where I come from, a man doesn't mock a woman to feel taller. He tips his hat and moves along." The cowhand sneered. "This ain't your saloon, stranger." Caleb's jaw set. "Maybe not. But decency doesn't need property lines." The tension was thick enough to choke on. Ellie watched, her heart hammering in her chest. The drunk man rose, puffing his chest. "You gonna tell me how to act, cowboy?" Caleb didn't flinch. He took one slow step closer, his voice dropping low. "No. I'm gonna show you." Before anyone could blink, Caleb's hand shot out, not with a gun, but with open strength, grabbing the man's whiskey and pouring it straight onto the floor. The crowd gasped. The man stumbled back, red with fury, but something in Caleb's gaze made him sit right back down. Caleb turned to Ellie. His tone softened, that edge melting into warmth. "Ma'am," he said, holding out a rough, calloused hand. "You don't let fools tell you who deserves to dance. You'll dance with me tonight." The saloon went silent. The laughter died, replaced by stunned whispers. Ellie stared at him, trembling. "My dress is torn," she whispered. He smiled, slow, honest, and without pity. "Then it'll be the prettiest torn dress in Wyoming when you're twirling in it." She hesitated, then took his hand. And as the piano player began a new tune, soft, hesitant at first, Caleb led her into the center of the floor. The same men who mocked her now stared, silent, ashamed, as Ellie swayed beneath the lamplight. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just the saloon girl. She was a woman being seen, truly seen, by someone who looked past the dirt and the dust and found the heart still shining underneath. When the music slowed, Caleb leaned close and whispered, "Let 'em laugh. They just don't know beauty when it's standin' in front of 'em." And though her eyes glistened with tears, Ellie smiled, because for once, the laughter wasn't louder than her heartbeat. Outside, thunder rolled over the plains, as if even the heavens had been holding their breath. The storm rolled in heavily that night, clouds gathering over Silverton like a warning from the old gods of the plains. By the time the saloon emptied, Ellie stood by the window, watching the rain beat against the glass. Caleb Holt had gone, disappeared the way drifters often did, leaving only his name and a question in her heart. Her father, Ellie Turner, came out from the back room, rubbing his temples. "You shouldn't be drawing attention, Ellie. That cowboy might have meant well, but trouble follows men like him." Ellie turned to him, frowning. "He defended me, Pa. No one else ever has." Henry sighed, sitting at a table that smelled of stale whiskey and debt. "Defendin', you don't pay what we owe. You think the Caro brothers care if a stranger likes your smile? The name chilled her, the Caro brothers, the roughest cattle hands this side of the divide. Men who'd humiliated her not an hour ago. They're mean, Pa, she whispered. Henry looked away, guilt in his eyes. They own half this town's cattle and nearly all its temper. Best keep quiet and stay small. That's how we survive. But Ellie wasn't sure she wanted to just survive anymore. Outside, the rain turned to mist, and a lone figure walked the muddy street toward the edge of town, Caleb Holt, hat pulled low, coat soaked through. He moved like a man who'd known both war and wandering, whose boots had carried him through too many places that weren't home. He reached a small cabin beyond the blacksmith shop, where an old horse snickered in greeting. Caleb ran a hand down its neck. Ain't nothin' changed, Scout. Town's still small, heart's still mean. He lit a lantern, setting it on the table beside an old photograph, a woman with kind eyes holding a baby. He looked at it for a long time, the rain whispering outside. Couldn't save you, he murmured. But maybe I can do something right this time. He pulled a folded letter from his coat, creased, faded, the writing almost gone. The words read, "If you ever come back to Silverton, remember what you promised me. Don't let them ruin her life, too. M.T." Caleb stared at the initials. M.T. Henry Turner's late wife, Mary Turner. Ellie's mother. Morning came slowly, gold light spilling over the plains. Ellie stepped out of the saloon, arms full of laundry, the hem of her dress damp with dew. She looked toward the hills, where smoke curled from a cabin chimney. She wondered if that was him. Just then, a voice cut through the quiet. "You keep looking that way, people start talking, Dot." It was Clara Barnes, her friend and fellow worker, hanging a line of linens nearby. Ellie smiled faintly. "Let 'em talk. They talk anyway." Clara gave her a knowing look. "That cowboy got under your skin, didn't he? I don't even know him." "Maybe not. But he knew what to say when no one else did." Ellie's smile faltered. "Do you think he'll come back?" Clara shrugged. "Cowboys ride in and out like the wind. But sometimes, the wind brings change." By noon, word had spread through town. The Caro brothers were looking for Caleb Holt. They didn't take kindly to being embarrassed in their own saloon. Down by the livery, Caleb was tightening Scout's saddle when a shadow fell over him. 3 men stood there, the Caros and their cousin, each with the swagger of men who'd never been told no. "Fancy seeing you again, stranger," said Jed Caro, spitting tobacco to the dirt. "You made us look like fools last night." Caleb didn't look up. Didn't take much effort. The second brother, Dale, grinned, cracking his knuckles. "You talk big for a man alone." "I'm not looking for a fight." Caleb's voice was calm, too calm. Jed stepped closer. "You humiliated us in front of half the town, then danced with the saloon girl like she's something worth dancing with. We're here to fix that." Caleb straightened, eyes cold as riverstone. "Walk away, boys." But they didn't. The first punch came fast. Caleb ducked it, sent a hard right into Jed's gut. Dale swung next, catching Caleb across the jaw. Mud flew, boots slipped, the scuffle was rough, real, and desperate. When it ended, Caleb stood over the 3 men, breathing hard. They were down but not dead, just bruised pride and sore bones. He spat blood on the dirt. "You tell your kind something," he said through clenched teeth. "You mock her again, and you'll be picking your teeth out of the dust next time." As they limped away, Caleb's eyes lifted toward the saloon. Through the upstairs window, he saw Ellie watching, her hand pressed to the glass, her eyes wide with fear and something else. Gratitude. He tipped his hat to her, even from that distance. And though she couldn't hear it, she felt the words he mouthed in silence, "You're safe now." That night, Silverton slept uneasily. The Caros weren't the kind to forgive, and the sheriff wasn't the kind to interfere when rich cattlemen started trouble. But somewhere in the dark, inside her small room above the saloon, Ellie smiled for the first time in years, because for once, someone had stood up for her. And somewhere in that same dark, Caleb sat on his porch, nursing a bruised jaw, whispering into the night, "I promised her mama I'd protect her." Guess it starts now. Morning light came soft and pale over Silverton, catching the dust that hung in the air like ghosts of yesterday's storm. The Turner Saloon opened slowly that day, the piano silent, the laughter gone. Ellie swept the floor with slow strokes, her mind miles away from the clinking of bottles and the shuffle of boots outside. She couldn't stop thinking about him, the cowboy who'd stood up to the Caros without a second thought. The man who'd looked at her like she was more than the town's joke, more than the girl with the torn dress and a past she couldn't outrun. Her father came down the stairs, heavy-eyed and silent. "You hear what happened?" he asked, voice gravelly. Ellie froze. "About what?" "Caros. They're riled up. Sheriff's callin' it a misunderstanding, but word is they're lookin' to settle it their own way." Her heart thudded. "He didn't start it, Pa." Henry sighed, rubbing his face. "Doesn't matter. Around here, truth doesn't weigh nearly as much as money." Ellie looked at him, realization dawning slowly and painfully. "You're scared of them." He didn't answer. Didn't have to. His silence said everything. Meanwhile, out by the Old Creek Road, Caleb Holt was tending his horse when a voice called from behind. "You don't look much like a man who regrets fightin'," said Clara Barnes, approaching with a basket. Caleb smirked faintly. "You must be Miss Turner's friend. She told me what you did." Clara set down the basket, biscuits, bacon, and a bottle of coffee so strong it could wake the dead. "Said you didn't even hesitate." He nodded, eyes on the horizon. "Didn't seem right lettin' those boys treat her that way." Clara studied him. "You from around here?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Was. A long time ago." Clara's brow furrowed. "Then you know her folks?" "Her mama," he said softly. "Mary Turner." Clara blinked, surprised. "Mary? She passed 10 years back." "I know," Caleb said, his voice low, almost reverent. "She was the only soul in this town who believed a man could change. When I left for the war, she made me promise something to come back if things ever got dark for her girl. Took me longer than I meant, but I keep my word." Clara watched him for a long moment, then said, "Ellie doesn't know." "She will," he replied. "But not yet. She's been through enough ghosts for one lifetime." Later that evening, the saloon filled again, men laughing too loud, boots thudding against warped boards, the smell of whiskey thick in the air. Ellie stood behind the bar, trying to keep her hands steady. Every time the door swung open, her heart leapt, hoping it was him. And then it was. Caleb stepped inside, dust and sunset clinging to his coat, his hat low. The room quieted, the way it always did when a man carried the weight of something unspoken. The piano stopped. The laughter thinned. Ellie's breath caught as their eyes met. He walked up to the bar, laid a silver coin down, and said softly, "Coffee, if it's still good." She smiled faintly. "It's better when you drink it here." A slow grin touched his lips. "That's so." Before she could answer, the saloon doors slammed open. 3 figures entered, the Caro brothers, bruised but unbroken, their faces carved with hate. The room froze. Jed Caro sneered, his voice sharp. "Well, look who's back. Thought you'd ride on, cowboy." Caleb didn't move. Didn't see a reason to. Jed glanced at Ellie, then back to him. "You tryin' to impress the saloon girl again? Ain't she the same one whose mama used to beg for credit?" Ellie flinched. The room murmured. Caleb's eyes darkened. "You'd best watch your mouth." Jed stepped closer. "Or what? You gonna fight the whole town?" Caleb's hand hovered near his holster, but before he could draw, Ellie grabbed his arm. "Please," she whispered. "Not here." Her voice, trembling, desperate, broke through the tension. Caleb slowly lowered his hand. Jed laughed. "That's what I thought." He leaned close to Ellie, voice dripping with cruelty. "Girl like you oughta know better than to stand with a man who'll be gone by sunrise." Caleb's jaw flexed, but he didn't speak. He turned instead, pushing open the doors and stepping out into the fading light. The sound of laughter followed him like gunfire. Ellie watched him go, tears burning her eyes. Then, without a word, she slipped out the side door, the cold wind wrapping around her shoulders. She found him by the corral, tightening his saddle straps. "Why didn't you fight back?" she asked, her voice breaking. Caleb looked up, eyes soft in the lamplight. "Because I fought too many battles that didn't change a damn thing. I ain't here to prove I'm strong. I'm here to make sure you don't end up like your mama." Ellie froze. My mama? He nodded, pulling something from his coat, a locket, old and tarnished. Inside was a faded picture of Mary Turner, holding a baby in her arms. Ellie's eyes filled. Where did you get this? She gave it to me before she died. Told me if I ever found you, to give it back. The night went still. The only sound was the creak of the stable door and the slow, steady beat of two hearts that had been lost too long. She said you'd be stronger than she ever was, Caleb murmured. And she was right. Ellie swallowed hard. You knew her, and you came back. Why? He looked at her, not with pity, but with quiet resolve. Because no one deserves to be laughed at for who they are. Least of all a woman who's already survived too much. The wind lifted, carrying dust and the faint sound of distant thunder. And for the first time, Ellie didn't feel small anymore. The next morning dawned golden and deceptively calm. But Silverton wasn't calm at all. Whispers traveled faster than the stagecoach through dry country. Everyone was talking about the drifter who shamed the Carrows and the saloon girl who stood by him. Ellie could feel their stares as she walked down Main Street, eyes sharp as glass, mouths half smiling in cruel amusement. She passed Mrs. Greer's mercantile, where two women pretended to arrange ribbons while whispering behind gloved hands. That Turner girl always was trouble, one said. First her mama ran off with a soldier, now she's caught herself another one. Ellie's chest tightened, but she kept her chin high. The air smelled of dust and judgment. When she reached the blacksmith's, she saw him, Caleb Holt, sleeves rolled up, hammering the edge of a horseshoe, the steady clang ringing out like defiance. He looked up, eyes softening when he saw her. You shouldn't be walkin' round alone. Folks are restless. I can handle a few stairs, she said, voice steady though her heart wasn't. He studied her a moment longer. You remind me of your mother more every day. That name again, mother. The sound of it both comforted and hurt. You said she helped you once. How? He set down the hammer, wiping sweat from his brow. I was 20, broke, meaner than a starved coyote. Got myself into a bad scrape. Your mama, she took me in, gave me a chance when no one else would. Said I had a good heart under all that dust. He looked down, his voice thickening. She died thinkin' the world might someday be kinder to you than it was to her. Ellie swallowed hard, tears threatening. It hasn't been. Not till now. Caleb held her gaze for a long moment, then said softly, then maybe it's time we change that. But fate had its own ideas. At the Carrow ranch, the brothers sat around a fire, nursing their bruises and hatred. Jed slammed his fist on the table. I want him gone. That drifter's tinnin' the town against us. Dale sneered. You think Sheriff will do something? He owes us half his pay. Jed leaned forward, eyes burning. Then we do it ourselves. Tonight. We burn him out. The third brother, Ray, hesitated. Ain't that risky? Folks might talk. Let 'em, Jed growled. Ain't no law against ridding this town of scum. They stood, the firelight casting long shadows on their twisted faces, men too proud to forgive, too small to forget. That night, Silverton slept uneasily. The wind howled through alleyways, rattling shutters and carrying secrets. Caleb sat on his porch, cleaning his revolver. Not because he meant to use it, but because it calmed his hands when his mind was restless. He didn't notice the flicker of movement at first, three shapes creeping through the sagebrush, oil-soaked rags in hand. Then came the smell of kerosene. He turned too late, flames licked up the cabin wall like hungry serpents. Scout, he shouted, freeing his horse from the stall as the fire roared to life. From across the field, Ellie saw it, orange against the night, smoke curling toward the stars. Without a thought, she grabbed a bucket, running barefoot through the dirt. Puh! Fire! She screamed as she ran. Henry burst from the saloon door. Ellie, what? It's Caleb. They're burning him out. She didn't stop to explain. Didn't stop at all. The hem of her dress caught in a fence, tore, but she kept running, the same torn dress that once made them laugh. When she reached the cabin, Caleb was coughing, dragging a saddle out through the smoke. Ellie, get back. She ignored him, flinging water uselessly at the blaze. No, I won't leave you. The fire hissed, greedy, unstoppable. Go, he shouted again, pushing her back. There's gunpowder inside. But Ellie's eyes were on something else, 3 shadows disappearing into the trees. The Carrows, she gasped. They did this. Caleb's expression hardened. Get Scout. Now. The explosion hit before they could move, a deep, thunderous roar that threw them both to the ground. Flames shot into the sky, the cabin collapsing in a storm of sparks and smoke. When the dust settled, Caleb pulled himself up, coughing hard. You hurt? Ellie shook her head, her face streaked with ash. No. But you're home. He looked at the burning ruin, jaw tight. Ain't the first thing I've lost. She touched his arm gently. Then you ain't losing me too. For a long time, neither spoke. The fire burned low and dawn began to edge the horizon. The next day, the town buzzed with talk again about the mysterious fire, the cowboy who lived, and the girl who ran through the night to save him. Some said it was foolish. Others whispered it was love. But one thing was clear: Silverton had changed. And in a town built on pride and rumor, that was dangerous. By the time the sun rose over Silverton, the story had spread like wildfire: the Turner girl and the drifter who survived the blaze. Every porch whisper, every sidelong glance, carried a new version. Some said the fire was an accident. Others said it was vengeance. But everyone knew one thing for certain: the Carrow boys had gone too far. Caleb didn't say much that morning. His cabin was nothing but blackened timber now, smoke still curling from the ashes. He stood beside what was left, hat low, eyes distant. Ellie came up quietly, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. I told the sheriff what I saw, she said softly. He didn't turn. And what did he say? That he'd look into it, she answered bitterly. Which means he won't. Caleb's jaw tightened. Didn't reckon he would. Sheriff Harper's been in the Carrow's pocket since the first cattle deal. She stepped closer, voice trembling. You can't just let them win. He looked at her then, really looked, and something in his eyes softened. I've been fightin' all my life, Ellie. Lost too much already to think fightin' fixes every wrong. She shook her head, tears threatening. But it ain't just about you anymore. That made him pause. The words sank deep, settling heavy in his chest. You're right, he said finally. It's about standin' for somethin'. Maybe this town forgot how. That evening, the Turner saloon was packed tighter than a cattle car on payday. Word spread fast: Ellie Turner was talking the stage again, the same girl who once hid behind bar tables and broken dreams. The piano started up, soft and steady. Ellie stood at the edge of the platform, heart pounding. For a moment, her eyes flicked to the back of the room, and there he was. Caleb, standing tall near the door, arms crossed, hat shadowing his face. The same man who'd told her once, don't let 'em laugh you outta your own worth. She drew a breath and began to sing, not loud, but sure. A sweet, aching tune her mama used to hum while hanging laundry in the wind. The room fell still. Every word hung heavy with truth, about loss, love, and second chances. And for the first time, Ellie didn't sing to please them. She sang for herself. When the last note faded, silence filled the saloon. Then, slow and deliberate, Caleb stepped forward. Jed Carrow rose from his table in the corner, clapping mockingly. Well, look at that. She found her voice. Maybe next she'll find her place, scrubbing floors again. The crowd murmured, uneasy. Caleb's voice cut through like steel. You best take that back. Jed smirked. You got nothing left, Holt. No house, no name, no reason to stay. Caleb took a step closer, calm as a man who'd already made peace with the outcome. You burned my home. You tried to scare a woman who never did you wrong. You think that makes you a man? Jed's hand twitched near his holster. Careful, cowboy. But before he could draw, Ellie's voice rang out sharp, clear, defiant. He ain't the one who needs to be careful. Every head turned. She walked straight toward the Carrows, dress torn at the hem, soot still on her sleeve. You've spent your lives, Logan, at people like me because you thought we were beneath you. But last night, when your fire tried to swallow us, that same man you mock pulled me from the flames. So if you're looking for someone worth respect. She turned to Caleb, her voice breaking with pride. You're looking at him. The saloon went silent. Even the piano man froze. Jed's face went red with rage. You don't know when to shut up, girl. He drew, but Caleb was faster. One clean motion, his revolver out and steady, the click echoing through the quiet. "Nobody's dying tonight," Caleb said, voice calm but cold. "You'll walk out that door, and you'll never touch her or anyone like her again." For a moment, it was just the sound of breathing and the slow, low creak of tension. Then Jed's hand dropped. He nodded once, sneering. "This ain't over." "Maybe not," Caleb said, lowering the gun. "But your time here is." They left. And when the door swung shut, applause broke out, hesitant at first, then full and thunderous. Ellie turned, her eyes meeting his. He smiled, small and quiet. "Told you once you deserved to dance. Guess I was right." She laughed through her tears. "You gonna make good on that promise, cowboy?" He offered his hand. "Reckon I am." And there, under the warm glow of lantern light, on the same floor where she'd once been mocked for a torn dress, they danced slow and easy, the room spinning away, the crowd fading to nothing but two hearts that finally found their rhythm. The morning after the dance, Silverton woke to a strange kind of quiet, the kind that comes after a storm, when everyone's still wondering if the worst has passed or if it's just waiting beyond the ridge. For the first time in years, Ellie Turner walked through town without hearing laughter behind her back. Women nodded politely. Men tipped their hats. Folks whispered about the girl who stood up to the Carrows and the cowboy who stood beside her. Even Sheriff Harper, who'd always looked away from trouble, doffed his hat when she passed. "Miss Turner," he said awkwardly. "Heard you showed grit last night." Ellie smiled faintly. "Guess I just got tired of being quiet." He nodded, unsure how to respond. "Town needs folks like you. Maybe things you'll start changing around here." But Ellie knew better. Silverton didn't change easily. And men like the Carrows didn't forgive. Out by the river bend, Caleb Holt stood by his horse, washing the soot from his hands. The sun had barely climbed above the bluffs, painting the water gold. Ellie found him there, walking slowly through the tall grass. "Didn't figure you for a man who hides by creeks," she teased softly. He turned, smiling at the sound of her voice. "Ain't hidin'. Just thinkin', Dot." "About what?" He hesitated. "How fast peace can vanish. How quickly a man's good moment turns to a target on his back." Ellie folded her arms. "The Carrows?" He nodded. "They ain't done. Not after last night. Men like that don't back down. They wait till you ain't lookin', Dot." She stepped closer, voice gentle but firm. "Then we'll just keep lookin', Dot." He met her eyes, soft brown against sky blue, and for a moment, he forgot every scar, every loss, every lonely night spent under cold stars. "You sound like your mama," he said. She must have been a stubborn one. He chuckled. She was something fierce. Had a way of making hope sound like a choice. "Maybe it is," Ellie said, glancing toward the horizon. "Maybe we just keep choosing it, no matter who tries to take it away." Later that afternoon, word spread. The Carrow brothers were seen riding out toward Broken Mesa, a stretch of land where the law never bothered to ride. Henry Turner found Caleb near the stables, worry carved deep into his weathered face. "Holt," he said quietly, "I heard they're gathering men." "Ain't good." Caleb nodded. "Figured as much." Henry's voice trembled. "She's my girl, but she won't listen to me anymore. Thinks she can face the world head-on. Reminds me too much of her mother. Promise me you'll keep her safe." Caleb looked him dead in the eye. "Ain't a promise I'll take light." That night, Silverton held its breath again. The sky bruised over with storm clouds and thunder rolled across the plains. Caleb saddled Scout, strapping his rifle to the saddle. Ellie appeared at the barn door, her hair loose, her expression steady. "You're going after them," she said. He didn't deny it. "Can't let him come back to town. Folks'll pay the price." "I'm comin' with you." "Ellie, don't start. You said yourself, it's about standin' for something." "Well, I'm standin' with you." He exhaled, knowing he couldn't stop her even if he tried. "All right. But you stay close." They rode out under a sky that looked ready to split in two, the wind cutting through the sage like whispers of the past. By the time they reached Broken Mesa, lightning was painting the cliffs in ghost light. They dismounted near a ridge and crept closer. Below, they could see the Carrows' camp, 3 horses, a fire, and the brothers talking low. "We ride at dawn," Jed was saying. "Burn what's left of the saloon, drive that girl and her daddy out for good. And that drifter, he won't see another sunrise." Ellie's breath caught, anger flashing hot. Caleb put a hand on her arm. "Not yet." But fate didn't wait for permission. A twig snapped under her boot. The camp went still. Jed spun, gun drawn. "Who's there?" In an instant, the mesa exploded into chaos, thunder, gunfire, and the sharp cry of wind tearing through dust. Caleb returned fire, knocking one gun clean out of a man's hand. Ellie ducked behind a boulder, heart pounding. "Stay down," Caleb shouted. Jed's voice echoed through the storm. "You should have stayed gone, Holt. This land ain't big enough for heroes." "Wasn't trying to be one," Caleb shouted back, steady and fierce. "Just trying to make sure cowards don't win." Lightning split the sky, and in that flash, Caleb saw Jed charging, pistol raised. 2 shots rang out. Then silence. Rain began to fall, slow and cold. When the smoke cleared, Jed Caro lay in the mud, his gun yards away. His brothers knelt beside him, fear finally cutting through their pride. Caleb holstered his weapon, eyes hard. "Take him, and get out of Silverton. You come back, and you'll wish the fire took you instead." The men nodded, dragging their brother into the storm. Ellie stood there, trembling not from fear, but from what she'd just seen. Caleb turned to her. "You all right?" She nodded slowly. "You could have killed 'em all." He looked away. "Ain't about killin'. It's about endin' it." The rain soaked them through, and for a long moment, they just stood there, 2 souls who'd lost too much to run anymore. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but certain. "You didn't just end it, Caleb. You changed this town." He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I reckon it's you who made it worth changin'. By dawn, they were back in Silverton, tired, soaked, but alive. And for the first time, the town didn't whisper about the girl with the torn dress. They spoke her name with respect. Ellie Turner, the girl who stood her ground. And the cowboy who taught her to believe she could. The rain had washed Silverton clean. Mud puddles filled the wagon ruts, and the air smelled of wet sage and hope, the kind that only comes after something nearly breaks you. By sunrise, the whole town knew what had happened out by Broken Mesa. Folks whispered it over coffee, over brooms sweeping their porches, over the clink of mugs in the saloon. But for once, the talk wasn't cruel. They spoke of courage. Of a girl who'd faced the men who'd mocked her, and a cowboy who'd faced the ones who'd wanted him gone. And in every version of the story, they stood together. When Ellie walked into town that morning, she wore the same torn dress, mended now with neat stitches and pride in every thread. Children pointed, smiling. Old Mrs. Riley from the bakery came out with a warm loaf wrapped in cloth. "Silverton owes you one, dear," she said kindly. "About time someone reminded us what decency looks like." Ellie didn't know what to say, so she just nodded and held the bread close. It had been so long since kindness didn't come with a price. Across the street, Caleb leaned against a hitching post, hat tilted low. His shirt was still damp from the night before, his arm wrapped where a bullet had grazed him. When Ellie saw him, she walked straight over. "You should be restin'," she said softly. He smiled, the kind that warmed slowly. "Restin's for men who got nothin' left to fight for." "You think there's still fight left?" "There always is, darlin'. But it's quieter now. That's how you know you did something right." They spent the morning helping Henry fix the fence out by their ranch. The boards had been splintered from neglect, not just by weather, but by years of feeling like they didn't belong. Now, every nail they drove in felt like building something worth keeping. As the hammer struck, Caleb said, "Funny thing about fences. Folks build 'em to keep things out. But sometimes, they're the only way to keep a home together." Ellie looked at him. "You talk like a preacher sometimes." He grinned. "Maybe I've just been talking to the right woman." She tried not to blush, but her smile gave her away. That evening, Silverton lit up with lamplight. The saloon was quiet, no more shouting or cards slapping the table. Instead, soft music drifted from a fiddle in the corner. People nodded at Ellie when she passed. No sneers. No laughter. Caleb offered his hand again, like he had the night before, when everything changed. "Care to dance, Miss Turner?" She hesitated, glancing around. "They're watchin', Dot." "Let him," he said, voice low. "Sure. They've seen worse." This time, she didn't wait. She took his hand. And there, under the warm glow of lanterns and the scent of pine and whiskey, they danced. Not because she had to prove anything, but because she could. Because this time, the music belonged to her too. Hours later, when most of the town had gone quiet, Caleb walked her home beneath the stars. The night air was cool, and the moon hung full over the hills. He said softly, "You know, the way folks look at you now, they'll start forgettin' the old stories." Ellie shook her head. "Let 'em remember. Let 'em remember that I wore a torn dress and still danced anyway." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "You're something fierce, Ellie Turner. Guess I learned from the best." He looked down for a moment, then met her eyes. "You ever think, maybe all that trouble we went through, it was worth it, just to end up here?" She smiled faintly. "I stopped believin' in fate a long time ago. Maybe fate didn't stop believin' in you." And just like that, she leaned closer, their foreheads brushing beneath the wide western sky. The world went quiet again, not with fear this time, but peace. By the time he left her porch, the crickets had started singing again. She watched him ride off until the darkness swallowed the last glimmer of his horse's coat. And for the first time in her life, Ellie Turner felt safe. Not because the world had changed overnight, but because she had. 2 weeks passed, and Silverton breathed easier than it had in years. The Turner Saloon had become a place of music again, not malice. Folks nodded to Caleb Holt when he walked by, no longer the drifter, now the man who saved the town's heart. But peace in the Old West never lasted long. Not for men who carried shadows behind their eyes. It was a cold dawn when Caleb saddled his horse for the ride to town. The sky was streaked with gray and red, the kind of sky that always whispered, "Trouble's comin'." Ellie stepped out from the cabin doorway, shawl wrapped around her shoulders, a worried look in her eyes. "You sure you have to go?" He adjusted the cinch strap, not looking at her yet. "Got a letter from Abilene. Someone claimin' to know me." Her brow furrowed. "And do they?" He hesitated too long. "Caleb," she said softly, "whatever this is, you can tell me." He sighed, running a thumb over the edge of his hat. "Before I came to Silverton, I rode with a crew. Men who didn't always take the right side of the law. One of 'em was my brother, Luke. We were close, till he chose the wrong trail. I thought he was dead." Her eyes widened. "You think this letter's from him?" He nodded once. "If it is, he's right in this way. Said he's got business unfinished." By noon, Caleb reached the edge of town. The streets were quiet, save for the wind kicking dust down the road. Then, from the distance, 3 riders appeared, their coats dark, their faces hard. The front man wore a black hat and a scar that cut deep across his cheek. Caleb's chest tightened. "Luke." His brother smirked, dismounting slowly. "Didn't reckon you'd forget me that easy." Caleb didn't move. "Heard you died in Dodge." "Died?" Luke laughed, dry and bitter. "Nah. Just learned how to live without rules." He glanced at the saloon. "Heard you've gone soft. Dancin' with saloon girls, playin' the hero." Caleb's jaw tensed. "She ain't a saloon girl. She's got more soul than you or me ever earned." Luke tilted his head. "There it is. That tone. Always the righteous one." He stepped closer. "Tell me, brother, you think you can run from who we are?" "I already did." Luke's smile faded. "Then you'll fall with the rest when I come for what's mine." That night, Ellie heard the gunfire from her porch. She ran to the edge of the yard, heart pounding as the echoes rolled through the hills. She grabbed her shawl and took off toward town, the path lit only by lantern light and moonshine. Her boots splashed through mud as she reached the main street and stopped. Caleb stood in front of the saloon, revolver drawn. Smoke curled from the barrel. Luke lay a few feet away, clutching his shoulder, blood soaking his sleeve. The other men were gone. "Caleb," she cried, running to him. He turned, eyes dark with a sadness she'd never seen before. "Didn't want it this way, Ellie." Tried talking sense into him, but he wouldn't stop. She knelt beside Luke, who was breathing hard, eyes glassy with pain. "You're gonna be fine," she said softly. Luke laughed weakly. "You sound like Ma." Caleb dropped to his knees, voice shaking. "You didn't have to ride back here, Luke. Could have started over somewhere else." His brother looked up at him. "You already did. Guess I just wanted to see what that felt like." Then his eyes closed and he went still. The sheriff came soon after, but no charges were filed. Everyone had seen Luke's gun drawn first. Still, the weight of it didn't leave Caleb's shoulders. He spent that night outside, staring at the stars. Ellie came out quietly, a blanket in her hands. She sat beside him, wrapping it around his shoulders. "You couldn't save him, Caleb. Some folks don't want saving." He didn't look at her. "He was my brother. Blood should mean something, Dot." "It does," she whispered. "But sometimes love ain't about holding on. It's about letting go." He turned to her then, his voice raw. "And if letting go means losing the last piece of who I was?" She smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's how you become who you were meant to be." The wind picked up again, rustling the cottonwoods along the riverbank. For a long moment, they just sat there, two souls in the quiet after too much storm. Caleb finally reached for her hand. "Ellie." She met his gaze. "You ever think maybe the world keeps trying to break us, just to see if we'll still choose to love anyway?" Her eyes softened. "Then I guess we keep choosing, Dot." And there, under the whispering wind and the first hint of dawn, they held on not to what was lost, but to what they still had left. The next morning broke slow and heavy, the kind of dawn that felt like it didn't want to rise. The clouds hung low over Silverton, and the air carried that sharp smell of rain on dust, like nature itself couldn't decide if it wanted to wash the sins away or remind everyone they were still there. Caleb Holt stood by the riverbank where the Turner Creek bent through the valley, his hat held low and his brother's old revolver resting in his hands. The water ran fast from the storm last night, carrying branches and broken reeds downstream. He stared into it for a long time before finally tossing the gun in. The splash echoed final, clean. Behind him, Ellie stood quiet, her dress caught by the wind. "You don't have to throw away what's left of him," she said softly. He didn't turn. "Ain't throwin' him away. Just settin' him free. That gun's been drawin' blood since before I knew better. He won't need it where he's gone. Neither will I." She nodded, stepping closer. "He wasn't the man you are, Caleb." He sighed. "He could have been. If I'd tried harder." She reached out, resting her hand on his arm. "You did try. You saved a town, saved me, and maybe that's how you saved him too. Just not in the way you thought." He looked at her then, the pain softening into something else, something like peace. The next few weeks were kind to Silverton. The Carrows, stripped of their power and pride, packed up and left for the border towns. The sheriff, feeling the weight of shame, started walking the streets again like he meant it. And Ellie Turner, the girl who once sang for tips and endured laughter, now ran the Turner Hall on her own terms. Every Saturday night, she sang under the warm glow of lanterns. The men tipped their hats, the women smiled, and every voice in that room carried a kind of pride they hadn't felt in years. Caleb usually stood near the back wall, quiet and steady, a ghost-turned guardian. One night, after the crowd cleared, Ellie sat on the edge of the stage, swinging her boots gently. Caleb approached, setting down 2 tin cups of coffee. She smiled. "You've been watching me sing for weeks now. You ever gonna ask me to dance again?" He grinned, that easy, crooked grin she'd come to know. "Thought maybe I'd wait till you finished conquerin' the town first." "Well," she said, teasing, "maybe I already did." He laughed, a sound that carried through the empty hall, soft and honest. Then he offered his hand, and just like that night months ago, she took it. They danced slowly, with no music this time. Just the faint hum of the wind through the cracks and the steady rhythm of 2 hearts learnin' to rest. Later, they walked outside, the moon high and silver. The sound of the river drifted from afar, the same one that had taken Luke's gun, and with it, the last piece of the past. Caleb stopped near the hitching post, glancing at the stars. "Funny thing," he said. "All that runnin' I did, all that fightin', and turns out what I was lookin' for was right here." Ellie's eyes softened. "Sometimes you gotta lose the road before you can find home." He looked at her, and the words seemed to settle deep, right where they were meant to. Home, he whispered, as if trying it out for the first time. Yeah, that sounds about right. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. Spring found the valley again, green pushing through the brown earth. And now and then, travelers passing through Silverton would stop by Turner Hall to hear the woman who sang like she'd seen the worst and still believed in the best. They'd whisper about the cowboy who sat in the corner, always near the door, always keeping watch, as if daring the world to try her heart again. And as the sun set one evening, Caleb stood with her out on the porch, arms crossed, the sky blazing orange and gold. She said quietly, "You think the past ever really leaves us?" He thought for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But if you're lucky, it starts walking behind you instead of in front." They stood there together as the sky turned to fire and then to stars. Two souls who'd been broken, laughed at, and nearly burned to ash, but still stood tall. And as the night wind carried the sound of the river away, Ellie leaned her head on his shoulder, whispering, "Guess we learned something, didn't we?" Caleb nodded. "Yeah, that sometimes a torn dress, a scar, or a bad past, they ain't what ruin you. They're what remind you how strong you really are." And for those who still remember their story, the cowboy who stood tall for a girl everyone mocked, and the woman who found her worth in his quiet courage, well, they say love like that doesn't die easily. It just rides on. If you enjoyed the story of Ellie Turner and Caleb Holt, make sure to check out our other tales from the wild frontier. Like, a cowboy found a girl crying by the river. He said, "You ain't alone now." And a wounded woman knocked on his door. He said, "Come warm by my fire." Each one carries a piece of the West and a piece of the heart that refuses to quit.